Hello and welcome to my channel. If this is your first time here, my name is Hannah. So as always, there is a lot of construction going on both sides of my apartment, so I'm actually filming this during the typical lunch break here to try to minimize the noise, and so far it seems like it's working. So hopefully we can get through this whole video without the construction starting back up. So now let's get into another rendition of all of the terrible movies I watch, or at least it seems that way. And there goes my cat pulling down the screen. Oh my god. Anyway, let's just get into this because this is starting off very chaotic. The first movie is La Chapelle du Diable, or The Chapel of the Devil, and that is the French name for it. In America, it is called The Unholy. It is directed by Evan, and for this last name, I'm gonna have to look at my notes because I'm not gonna be able to pronounce this. I'm gonna butcher it. I'm sorry in advance. Spiliotopoulos? This is his directorial debut. However, he actually wrote the live-action Beauty and the Beast, well, co-wrote, with Steven Chbosky of all people. And when I saw that, I kind of had to do a double take. I was not expecting that. It came out this year, is a religious horror, and unfortunately, we're starting off on a bad point, and I only gave it 2 stars. Anori is continually walking around because he wants to get into the recycling. Alice, a young hearing impaired girl who, after a supposed visitation from the Virgin Mary, is inexplicably able to hear, speak, and heal the sick. As word spreads and people from near and far flock to witness her miracles, a disgraced journalist hoping to revive his career visits the small New England town to investigate. When terrifying events begin to happen all around, he starts to question if these phenomena are the works of the Virgin Mary or something much more sinister. So I never heard of this movie until I opened my theater app just to kind of see what new movies were out, and it was one of the ones listed there. I was really surprised. I just kind of assumed maybe it was a foreign language movie because I had never seen or heard anything about it. So it just didn't seem like there was much marketing for this. However, Jeffrey Dean Morgan is in this, and that really caught me off guard. I was pretty surprised by that, and I was like, shouldn't this be a bigger movie then? But I still haven't really heard much about it, so I don't really know what the expectations were with this movie. The opening scene was actually one of the best parts. It was super brutal, and I was just like, oh wow, like, is this the direction this is gonna go? But unfortunately, it didn't keep that feel and that intensity up throughout the entirety of the movie, and it really just nosedived from there. Literally every single scene in this was a jump scare, and that also really brought the rating down for me. Sure, we can have some jump scares here and there was one that I actually liked, but just with all of them being like that, it was so predictable, and God, it just felt so stereotypical and just like, really, this is how you're gonna supply the scares? However, there were some scenes with the spirit and like the way she moved that were really creepy, and it made me want to know who was playing her. Another downfall in this movie is since Jeffrey was the lead, all the other actors really paled in comparison. They just really couldn't keep up with him, and so the acting just fell flat throughout the entirety of the movie, and it felt really cheesy as well in some moments. I thought he did fine, and he was definitely like the shining star of this, but I mean, one person can't really carry this movie. So unfortunately, this ended up being another disappointment. However, I really do like religious horror, so the whole concept of it I thought was really interesting, which is why I gave it the 2 stars, mainly just for the concept. But just the way they pulled it off and told the story, it just really didn't work. Next, we have a movie with an unfortunate title, The Midnight Meat Train. This is directed by Ryuhei Katamura. He's actually made a lot of movies, but I haven't seen any of the other ones. They're mostly foreign language films. This came out in 2008, is a horror, thriller, mystery, and I also gave this 2 stars. A photographer's obsessive pursuit of dark subject matter leads him into the path of a serial killer who stalks late-night commuters, ultimately butchering them in the most gruesome ways. So this is one of those movies where I've seen it mentioned in horror movie threads and horror threads 1,000,001 times. Obviously, there's always the joke of like, haha, this sounds like a porn movie kind of thing, but it's definitely far from that. And just kind of scrolling through movies one night, came across it on a streaming service and was like, oh hey, heard a lot about this, let's try it out. So right from the get-go, this is obviously an early 2000s movie, but in my opinion, that's not exactly bad. Like, there's nothing wrong with that at all, of course. The beginning starts off fine and interesting. It keeps you engaged and it makes you want to know what's going to happen next and where this movie's going to go. However, this really devolved into a CGI gore fest, and the CGI is so bad. And the way some of the scenes are done, I'm really wondering if this was during that whole like 3D movie craze, because some of the scenes really seem like they are trying to like throw blood and gore at you kind of thing. So that's really what this reminded me of. Also, the characters in this movie, they make really horrible and dumb decisions to where you're just screaming at the screen, like, why are you doing this? Like, oh my god, no person would do this. And oh, it was so frustrating and made no sense. And apparently there's only one freaking cop in New York, and but it just gets to the point where it is so annoying. Also, the ending really makes no sense, comes out of nowhere, is really what the fuck, and you don't really get the answers that you want. For me, the whole movie just really isn't explained enough, and when I was looking it up after, apparently, I don't know how true this is, but supposedly this whole thing is supposed to be an allegory for a closeted man discovering that he's homosexual, and it's just kind of like, what? But if you do think about it in that way, some of the scenes that really make no sense kind of do if you put a gay lens on it, but it's still just like, what? So I don't really know what to think of that. Personally, I'm also not really into gory movies. It's just a bit too much for me, and this really, really takes it there, even with the bad CGI. So I think that's another reason why this really wasn't the movie for me. Looking it up before I turned it on, I saw that, yeah, there's gonna be some gore, but it didn't seem like it was gonna be too bad, but yeah, I should have just listened to the title on that one. Next, we have the shining star of this video, and that is The Suicide Squad. This is obviously directed by James Gunn. It came out this year, and this is a sci-fi action adventure comedy. And I gave this 4 stars, and it probably could even go up to 4.5, really. Supervillains Harley Quinn, Bloodsport, Peacemaker, and a collection of nutty cons at Belle Reve Prison join the super secret, super shady Task Force X as they are dropped off at the remote, enemy-infused island of Corto Maltese. So, this movie has absolutely no business being as good as it is. I did not see the original Suicide Squad that came out however many years back, and so I really can't compare the two, but obviously everyone's heard the criticism on that one. So going into this, it's not only a sequel, but it's like a soft reboot kind of thing. So essentially they just kind of pretend the previous one didn't happen. What's really great about this one is you don't have to think. There's no thinking required to watch this. Nothing is over-explained. Everything is just accepted like it is what it is. And so you don't have any weird science mumbo-jumbo that you have to try and follow. I honestly would love to watch this again. It's a great popcorn movie, great action, and it's just a fun time. It's one of those movies that just works, and personally, it's probably the best DC movie I've seen. The fight scenes were also really great. Since I saw Black Widow a few weeks before this one, I could kind of compare the two, and there was a very visible difference how in like Black Widow it has all the jump cuts where you don't really see what's happening well, and here you pretty much see the entire scenes. And there were some really creative ways they did that as well. Like at one point you're seeing the fight scene through a reflection, and I thought that was really fun and interesting. And honestly, just being able to see what's going on is a plus, obviously. But it's a great movie, and I definitely recommend seeing it. Obviously, not for children, and it does have gore, so if you can't handle that, I wouldn't recommend it then. But even me, who really doesn't like gore that much, it wasn't that bad. There were a few scenes where I was like, I don't want to see that kind of thing. But that was all. It didn't really take away from the movie for me, and we all just loved it. Finally, we have the worst movie in this list, and that is Fear Street in 1994. This is directed by Leia Janiak. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. She directed all 3 of the Fear Street trilogy movies. All 3 of these came out in the beginning of July of this year. They are mystery horror, and I only gave this a half a star. Like, I can't even put up fingers for that. It's just bad. A circle of teenage friends accidentally encounter the ancient evil responsible for a series of brutal murders that have plagued their town for over 300 years. Welcome to Shadyside. So, like many a horror fan, I loved the Fear Street series as a kid. I remember I had a duffel bag full of Goosebumps and Fear Street books. Like, that was my jam. I remember going down the aisles of the library and picking out those books. There's some covers where they're just ingrained in my head. Like, I loved them. And that made this really painful to get through. The characters themselves were 100% the worst part of this movie. They are extremely unlikable. Like, literally all of them. There are 2 that kind of have some character development and you end up liking a bit more. However, it completely is meaningless at the end. And that was so frustrating. But the main character, Dina, and her ex-girlfriend, Sam, they are completely insufferable. They come off as completely selfish and even completely heartless at times, especially at the end. And it's just like, what? Like, it makes no sense. And I don't understand how a person would ever react to things in that way. And I don't know, it was just so off-putting. The movie also feels like it's directly making fun of the viewers at some points. Like, I understand Fear Street can be corny, cheesy, have puns and stuff like that, but the name of the towns that this focuses on, like their high school mascots and everything, it's literally the Shadyside Witches and the Sunnyside Devils. Really? It's just so, like, on the nose, and it just feels like it's making fun of you for it. It's just not fun. This is listed as a mystery horror, but this comes off way more as a teenage drama than anything. The horror feels really secondary, and there just doesn't feel like to be a resolution of anything. The music in this was actually really good, but the way they flipped through the songs was really strange, especially in the beginning. It's like 30 seconds and like 5 different songs, and you're just kind of like, wait, what? It almost just like feels like that someone was listening to like an iPod and just kept hitting skip to the next song. I don't know, it was pretty strange. But this entire thing just made me not want to watch the other 2 movies, because essentially this is a Netflix trilogy. This first one came out at the beginning of July, and then the week after that, the second one, and the week after that, the third one would come out. And it's all supposed to be like this cohesive story. And this first one is 1994, then it's 1978, I think, and then it's 1666, because of course it is. Why wouldn't it be? So the timeline does go backwards, which the whole concept of it sounds interesting, but oh my god, this first one is just trash. It really is. And so since the same person directed the other 2, it's just kind of like, do I want to watch more trash? One other thing that I thought was kind of funny is that, like I said, this is pretty much a teenage drama. The main characters are like 16, 17 years old, something like that. And the age of the lead actress is 28. I thought that was kind of funny. So, this is pretty much just like Hollywood's interpretations of how teenagers would act and stuff, and it fails. Wow, I didn't realize this list had so many horrible movies on it. Apparently, I am just really bad at picking out movies to watch. But I don't know, I feel like as a horror fan, you kind of have to go through all of that stuff that's mediocre to not so good to try and find the gems. But as always, thank you for hanging out with me. It is greatly appreciated, even though you may not want to watch these movies. But until next time, bonne journée and au revoir.